Hey, welcome into another edition rather of the Blue and Gray Rice Football Preview Show. Joining me, as always, today is JP Heath, voice of the Owls. I'm Matthew Bartlett, director and managing editor of the Roost, and we are both all smiles on this Wednesday. Early morning, mid afternoon, whatever time you want to call it. It doesn't matter. It's a good week. How are you feeling in Birmingham last week, JP?
A-okay, brother. How are you? And just superb victory Wednesday. But as you do with some of the losses, you don't dwell on those. You gotta move ahead. But on our case, we can dwell as much as we want. But that was a potential game-changing W, and at just the right time. So talk about some of the potential ramifications of that. That was a huge one, and it lets you know. Yeah, we'll get into that, but I feel good.
No,
Great.
you're absolutely right. Coach Bloomgren and the staff, they can talk about compartmentalizing and moving on. They're the ones who have to actually put a game plan together for North Texas. We just sit here and talk. So we're going to dwell a little bit on the UAB game. Rice winners last week in Birmingham, 30-24. I don't know if you were aware of this when you were calling it. I found it out when I was going through my notes later. UAB had not lost a conference game at home since they restarted their program in 2017.
Yeah, I forgot that to obviously say it in the moment. That would have been good timing, but I read that after like you, and it puts it all in perspective. They lost to Liberty their very first game at the stadium, but now Rice has as many wins as UAB does at Protective Stadium. That's one of those odd little quirks, but it won't stay like that for long. But it was, I hate to say monumental because you don't know what will come after it, but it was the best all-around win that I've seen in the Mike Bloomgren era. Yeah, I said it. That includes Marshall in there too. But the timing of it, just the way that what they did to get to it, and potentially finding your answer at quarterback. At least you hope so. At least for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I'm going to go in all the wood that I can find around me and knock on that when it comes to quarterback health and ability at Rice. But you did mention it, and I think it's telling. All around complete. The Marshall win is the kind of the 1A to the 1B, however you want to rank these in terms of Bloomgren's accomplishments at Rice. But the Marshall win, Rice scored one offensive touchdown in that game, had 5 interceptions and a pick 6. So I think by any stretch, you talk about the performance Wiley Green had, finished 16 of 18, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns after starting 1 for 4. Marvelous. Coach Bloomgren called it a clinic is the word he used, both post game and when I was talking to him at practice this week. And originally the plan was to return to Jake Constantine as soon as he was healthy. He was unable to go Saturday against UAB. I asked Bloomgren what his plans were on practice. First thing Monday, Jake was back, Wiley was back, and both were taking first team reps. I said, "Who's the starter? Are you going back to Jake?" He said, "Nope, it's Wiley." And it's hard to argue when you see a performance like that. Now, you have been calling games for Rice longer than Bloomgren has been around. Where does Wiley's performance against UAB kind of stand up against the great quarterback showings that you've seen over the past decade or so?
You know how my mind goes. I'll think of others. Definitely, like I said earlier, definitely the number one with Bloomgren, all things considered. I would say Dreyfus Jackson had a couple. It's easily top 3 or 5, if I can be so bold. Dreyfus had a really good bowl game there. We were out in Hawaii, got stuck in Hawaii, worst place to get stuck in. Obviously, our guy Taylor McCarg, whose seat I am not literally sitting in, but Taylor had a number of good ones. That run to end the 12 season. And really, it still feels like I just got here because, you'd have to go back to the Texas Bowl, Chase Clement, what he did to find as far as efficiency goes, and probably people slapping their monitors and pounding their tables. But, man, it's up there. If there are any above it, And people would look at the stats and say, oh, well, he only threw for 205 yards, but it was the way he did it. And after what happened, that stink fest that happened the week before, it's the timing of it. You have to figure everything into it. So to truthfully answer that, can't say until the next couple of weeks. When we're looking back at the season, if we do one of these season wrap-ups or going into the La Tech week or hopefully a bowl week, like, man, that Wiley game, then it might even go further up the list. Was that diplomatic enough? But I would put it up there towards the top. But great question. I had not kind of thought about that. I'll get back with you on Saturday and maybe bounce that one off my brother Nate to see what he thinks too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like you don't want to be a prisoner of a moment, and you don't want to be uber reactionary because every time something great happens, it's instantly elevated up those rate rankings or for whatever they're worth. But Wiley had the fumble where it looked like he kind of double clutched. He intended to throw the pass and then got a defender in his face and tried to unwind after he'd released. So there was one fumble in there, so it wasn't perfect.
Not a fumble, by the way. That was not a fumble. I went berserk on that one, and that was the most ridiculous call I had seen in some time. And let's just say I have talked to powers higher than me that agreed. Like, yeah, that was a phantom fumble, by the way. And I really don't like announcers that get into the wheezies and talk about, oh, the officials are against us. They're not against you. But in that case, what were you looking at? And anyway, tuck rule, like you see parts of the tuck rule. Sorry, I had to at least get that point stated.
Oh, it's good. You getting some spicy officiating takes. Don't worry, fans. We will graduate. Really sorry. We will graduate from CUSA refs to AAC refs, and I promise you, they won't be any better.
Exactly.
Quick aside, I guess we didn't mention it because the news was percolating, had not been officially announced. Let's hit on that real quick because I think it ties actually into the stretch of games Rice is playing upcoming. But Rice to the AAC. This wasn't even on our show sheet. How could we have forgotten about this? Must have taken a heck of a win. But
old news, right?
Right. Rice plays UTSA 2 weeks ago. They play UAB last week. They get North Texas this coming Saturday, and then I guess we head over to Charlotte, and lo and behold, all four of those teams are headed with Rice to the American Athletic Conference. That was announced, I believe, officially on Thursday. So I know a lot of Rice fans have been clamoring and hoping that AD Joe Carlgard and everybody involved with the administration would get Rice into a better conference. It certainly looks like that has happened, and so far, Rice 1-0 in AAC action.
You're jumping ahead till 23, right? Yeah, but that it is it's a potential game changer. Like I said, that gives you all the tools and to take that next step to potentially be the type of program you can be under Coach Bloomberg. We're just talking football specific, obviously, here in a game week, but I encourage folks to go back and listen to my talk with Joe on the Coach Bloomgren show Monday night. And I'll have another podcast with Joe where we go more in depth with him coming up in the next week or so. But it was like you and I were texting. I don't mind telling you, I was just elated, to minimize. I was very happy when the news broke right before the coaches show after the UTSA game. And then, like you mentioned, the Rice sandwich mixed in there with the upcoming schedule. It is, you'd rather be in than out. And it's a potential game changer as far as the conference. The number one thing I like about it most is the regionalization of it, to go back to Tulsa again, to get back in a conference with SMU and Tulane. And my gosh, I won't even get into the basketball and baseball trips and what that could mean for all the other great sports that have been doing really well. But to build football back up to where they want it to be, this move was almost necessary, and such a clutch move by a lot of people in the department. And it has a great type of generational impact if they can seize this moment and continue to build the program up like we've seen with that win on Saturday, that the potential that this program could be.
Yeah, obviously the relationships we have, we think the world of the administration and everybody that played a part in making this move. But if I could just not to not to fanboy too much, but to emphasize that this is huge. This isn't just, oh wow, this is good news for Rice, but to be able to sit and at this point, by the time we're done taping this, I don't know if there's going to be anybody left in Conference USA. ODU out the door today. Southern Miss out the door, I guess, on Monday. Marshall is trending towards it. Louisiana Tech, we're trading out trips to Ruston for New Orleans. You're not too bummed about that, are you? So yeah, this is huge. This is exciting, man. Trade out, add Navy onto the schedule on a recurring basis. SMU, it's going to be fun, man. And that starts. We could spend a whole while on that, and we won't because we're going to go. This is a preview show for previewing football, but I did think the tie-in there with North Texas, who Rice has, played many times and will continue playing into the future. And I think as we kind of tie all this together, JP, it is kind of interesting that the litmus test for is this for real or is this a flash in the pan starts with North Texas, because North Texas, as you remember, was the team that kind of made Rice look really silly the week before they played Marshall last season. Rice was coming off a dominant win against Southern Miss. Everything was right in the world. They were going up against the North Texas team that was struggling and then got put in their place over there in Denton. Jalen Darden had a pretty good touchdown catch. Jason Bean had an 82-yard touchdown run or something. Good news for Rice. Neither of those players is still there. Darden's off with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Jason Bean is scoring touchdowns, well, or not at Kansas. But we'll start with the North Texas defense. I think that's the most relevant because that's the problem point from last year. Deion Noville is still there, the defensive tackle for North Texas that in Bloomgren's own estimation during the press conference on Tuesday, prevented Rice from doing anything. He stopped the running game. He blew up the passing game. He was a terror for this offensive line and really rendered everything Rice was trying to do on their offensive game plan moot. So starts with stopping Deion Noville and the North Texas front. If you can do that, JP, you got to like your chances with what we've seen from Wiley Green and the North Texas secondary, which has been up and down so far.
Yes, and the emphasis that the coach put on, I think it was you that asked Coach Bloomgren the question yesterday about Noville and how Shea Baker has improved so much. Of course, Isaac Clarkowski starts the year at center, and memory serves, Clark was the center in that game against Noville last year, but Baker came in. Obviously, they were helping a lot, but when you can wreck shop up the middle and just football 101 and get that interior pressure, get into that lap of the quarterback, that's destructive. And that's what did in a lot of Rice's season. Like at the time, you're thinking, okay, you didn't really know how long Mike Collins would be out. And that really bummed you out. And Noville was the big reason for that. 3 of those sacks were in the first half. And this is a team offensively and defensively that it has a lot of injuries too. It starts with the Rice line. How do you handle Noville? And with this newly found resurgent offense, can you get the same connections you got with Pete and Bailey on those quick strike routes? Obviously, there'll be some different changes in the game plan with different personnel, but it starts up front with that. How do you handle the big fella up front? And then you'll know how the rest of the day will go.
But technical difficulties here. Bear with us, guys.
There you go. I see you moving again. I did have some big rain at the Heath Casa earlier today. Well, it's just me, folks. The show you've been craving. No, not all. We're going to get hooked up again with Matthew. I can tell you, I know how to vamp for time. I'm in a speaking business. We will have the broadcast coming up. Homecoming 2021 say 1 o'clock start. There you are. See, just
Hey guys.
Reset it and come back in.
Yeah, I don't know about that. All these storms going through, knocking stuff out. But I'm back. I'm sure you said something very eloquent about Bloom's game plan for stopping Dion Noville. But building on that, I
Block
do
him.
want to talk
I
about
said block him and then Wiley Green, do what you did last week. That's essentially what I said.
right, and not to not to go back to the well again, but it kind of feels like Rice, if they can get good play, and this is something they did really well, I thought, against UAB, if they can get good play in the trenches, a lot of things open up. Because if you look at that game, I think Rice only averaged, I think it was just under 3 yards per carry against UAB, which is not that wonderful. Like we would like to see it higher than that. But the runs they did have, they were able to block and get the explosive plays and get, if they needed 3, they got 3 or 4. That is what they did so well. So I think on the Rice front, if we see an encore of that performance on the offensive line, not only can you block Noville, but you might even have some time to take some shots down the field.
Yeah, and part of my speech there was about getting Pete and Bailey involved again, and that opens up once you get that home wrecker, that shop wrecker, Noville contained. But I just don't know if this is the same North Texas team that we saw last year up at Apogee. But they're the way they've played and competed, they've had a really tough schedule too, and they've had some close games. They led Liberty a lot of that game, and you can't overlook them. It's fool's gold when you look at a team's records, just like looking at Rice's record going into that game, and they give that performance like they did at UAB. You can't look at UAB's record. They do have some injuries. I was reading your boy Brett Vito's stuff last night, and it looks like they've got some banged up guys, but you can't overlook that record one bit.
No, you can't. But I will say the lowest point total of a North Texas opponent so far this season is 24. Louisiana Tech put up 24. Every other team that North Texas played this season, FBS team, they did thump Northwestern State down there in Louisiana, but every other FBS team that North Texas had played this season has put up at least 35 points. So you got to like that for the Rice offense. This should be a spot where, like you mentioned, those guys, everybody was clicking against UAB. A big catch by Seth Patterson. Bailey had a good third down conversion. Just everybody kind of made a play, which was nice. You got to have that this week. And then if you can just repeat and do that same thing, even if you regress a little bit and you don't hit 85, 90% of your passes after the first drive, even if it's only 70, 75, you should be able to get enough going on offense here with that kind of what we've seen from this North Texas defense. You would think, but what do we know, right?
Yeah, and it starts with setting up that run. You saw how that softened up UAB last week, and they were able to hit those quick slants and then go deep occasionally, but more it was that quick strike passing game that Wiley found connections with Pete and Bailey. And I don't want to shoehorn or take this conversation a different direction, but it can't be not said on this these airwaves, internet, that the new green light mentality is a real thing. And that was preached going into the game. You wrote your long post about that because obviously you know what's going on. They look different at UAB. They had a swagger. Not that they haven't had that in other games, but this is a potentially, again, down the line. I'm not saying it's going to be, but it has that potential to be a season-changing, program-changing moment if they can play like that again. They'll have to win every game like that. There's still some rebuilding to do. They're by no means an unfinished product, but the way they played and to have the result they did with that mentality, that's why leading off, I was giddy. Dave, thanks to David again for filling in for Nate, but I was just like, we kept joking about saying green light over and over again, but it really had that theme that they came and they had a renewed intensity, and to see that improvement, the lowest of the lows against UTSA and the peak they played against UAB, that gave me a lot of hope and confidence for the future.
Yeah, you plugged it for me, but I really enjoyed putting that piece together. It's go to atheroost.com. You want to click on the football button, you'll find it there. I thought the green light mentality, that's something that they'd mentioned previously during practice, but to see kind of that played out in a game, I thought that was huge. And then we don't know what happens if Charlie Mendez is not run into on that 4th and 7 punt, and Rice doesn't score on their first possession of the game. But that moment, and I think we saw those close plays, like Rice played extremely well all phases, deserved to win that game with how well they played. But it is worth noting that we're 5 for 5 on 4th down. Which is not something that you can count on happening on every single occasion. And that fumble that rolled down the sideline that Antonio Montero was able to fall on was one wobble away from going out of bounds and UIB keeping the ball. So a couple things went right. We need to see against North Texas what this team does if everything doesn't break the right way. And I'm not saying it did against UIB, but it felt like earlier in the season, there were a lot of things that didn't go the right way. They had some things go the right way against UAB, and now we need the happy medium.
Yeah, 100%. And you saw those breaks. I'm fully of the belief that you create your own luck, and that happens when you play with that intensity. Go, let's go. Come on, let's go, let's play. Very simplified. There's my coaching 101. But I think you saw those breaks go their way once they had that. I love the post-production cinematic thing they did, and they show the ends. I eat that stuff all day, and twice on Wednesday, I guess this case. I love that kind of behind the scenes stuff because I'm always perched up in the booth. But you saw that play out in that video the marketing folks did. And yeah, keep that intensity. Don't remember that. Remember that. Don't let that fall away, and don't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if we have any Batman fans out there, but I'm a Batman fan, and kept coming back to Two-Face, Harvey Dent. You create your own luck with the two-head-sided coin, and that's kind of what it felt like when Rice was going down. And they put themselves in a lot of situations that no individual play seemed like. Yes, they were fortunate to go 5 for 5 on 4th down, but there was no like. In the third and 19 conversion they had, might have been the most improbable that they got, but there wasn't any individual play like a 4th and 1, a 4th and 3, a 4th and 2 with this offense. You're like, yeah, the jumbo package, they get to you. That's what they do. Like nothing seemed entirely amiss. So that was encouraging. And before we close out, we do want to hit the other side of the ball a little bit because we talked about the North Texas defense and what Rice is going to face. We need to talk about the North Texas offense and Seth Luttrell for as tough of a go as he is having this season, and maybe kind of our interpretation of when we think Luttrell, when we think of kind of an air raid-esque style offense. I thought this was interesting. North Texas leads Conference USA in rushing yards per game in conference games. 213 yards per game on the ground. They've had Oscar Attaway, one of the guys they were hoping to lean on a lot at running back this season, has been out. They've had to turn to other guys to pick up the slack. But I know we might not have thought that, UAB is the ground and pound team, right? That we kind of maybe mentally think. North Texas averaging 60 more yards per game on the ground than UAB. So turn it over to you for this question. You've had a couple injuries on the D-line for Rice. How do you think Rice fares against what North Texas is going to do? Because it's not going to be the same kind of running attack as they saw last week against UAB.
It's not. You're 100% right as usual, but that's because of the components around it.
Can we clip that?
Yeah, David, get to work on that behind the scenes. But DeAndre Torrey scares me. I have the utmost respect because I remember he's had some good games against Rice in the past. And, yeah, with Schumann and with Orji out, although Piercy has done. You're a dude, man. Piercy, I like your game, man. And up the middle with Ikenna flipping spots around the line, and another pause button side tease. Go listen to Cedric Calhoun on the Bloomgren Show Monday night. He is a wired guy, and his unit's going to be the key stopping this running game, because the stat is Rice is 0-3 when allowing a 100-yard rusher. Some of that's deceiving because you have who should be the Heisman winner. He's the best player in college football, Bijan Robinson, doing that. He's factored in there too. But they've got to stop Torrey. That's the number one thing. And they've got to smother him, and they can't let that momentum get bubbling early. And might I request a couple of early scores? You saw how things opened up when you're the team being chased and not the chaser. So you saw, and UAB responded, and you responded right back to them. Okay.
They're a different football team, man.
Yeah.
And I would like for my own edification, I would like to know, can Rice maintain this? I think swagger is a word you use. Can they have that swagger if they fall behind by 2 touchdowns? Can they fight back instead of having to start 2 touchdowns ahead? I'd love to find out that, but I would rather just not know, and just rather them start with an early lead, and we'll never know what happens if they fall behind. Let's play it that way. But I think it's interesting. DeAndre Torrey is going to be huge in this game. North Texas actually, this kind of shocked me when I saw it. Dead last in Conference USA in passing. North Texas has 2 touchdowns through the air in their 3 Conference USA games and 3 interceptions. That just is, man, after the passers that they have had in that program, and the wide receivers, they got a couple wide receivers playing in the NFL right now. And they had talent. They had some blue chip guys come in at wide receiver. It has not panned out. Jason Pirtle, the tight end, might kind of be the go-to guy for this offense. So it's going to be interesting matching up. Whoever ends up taking the slots at quarterback, I guess it's going to be Ani is the last that I saw. But again, you are now Hopkins, or even if Tyler Johnson had gotten to that game, you go back to UTSA and Frank Harris, some experienced quarterbacks who had played at a high level this year and in previous year. Ani has kind of he's had his moments, but has struggled to keep the job. So you got to think that this is a situation where, all cards on the table, Rice matches up better on defense with the UAB, with the North Texas offense, than they did against UAB. And they were able to hang tough with UAB. So I hate that I'm a math guy. I hate that the transitive property doesn't work in sports. It doesn't. But on paper, you got to think that across the board, there's not a matchup with the North Texas offense and the Rice defense that particularly scares you. Is there one I'm missing, or one that has heightened your curiosity?
The number one being Torrey, but don't overlook Ani. He had his best game against Liberty. Like I said earlier, they led some of that game. And we all know Liberty, one of the best G5 schools out there, at least the last year and a half, 2.5 years. Ani had a season high in completions and yard attempts against Liberty. Threw for 305 yards at Missouri on our boy Blaze. So in Charlotte, he threw for, what is it now? 382 against Charlotte last season. So it's in there. It's somewhere in there. You just don't want that to be brought out for the 101st homecoming coming up. And I bet they play with the chip for that too. As we have found recently, teams don't like being the homecoming. So, and this is something we haven't mentioned. We talked about a lot in pre-UTSA week. This is a rivalry game. And this is one of the things I loved about the conference switchover. Yeah, bring it. Let's have a rivalry. Like, let's have these rivalries percolate. And North Texas has won 6 of the 11 meetings. So I love the regional games, but it all depends. I can't wait to see how Rice responds after what I think was the highlight of the Mike Bloomgren era, that win at UAB.
Yeah, and the team talks about going 1-0 each week. That's their focus. They're all eyes on this North Texas game this week, but we kind of like to take a step back and kind of look bigger picture. Wiley Green's first career start came on the road against North Texas, a game that Rice lost. That was going back to, is that 2018 now at this point? I asked him on Tuesday, I said, the last time you played North Texas versus this game you're playing on Saturday, compare and contrast, what's different about this program? He said, there's some of the same dudes, but it's night and day. And that was kind of what he was implying in talking to me. And I think that's kind of true. And if we want to, at risk of talking bigger picture narratives, if Rice can close this out and Rice can win this game against North Texas, something they couldn't do with Green at the helm 4 years ago, then all of a sudden you're 3-1 in conference play. You've gotten the demons off of you, beaten two teams that had your number in the past. Even North Texas, the game they won in 2019 at Rice Stadium, it involved Trayshawn Chamberlain separating a man from his body in the end zone on a 4th down play. So
That's right. Yeah.
It's been close. This would be another step to put it down and say, yep, we're not perfect. We didn't want UTSA to happen, but we're clearly moving forward. So that's the hope. That's kind of what I have my fingers crossed, what I would like to see. But I guess that's why they play the games, right? We will be here next week regardless, as we always are. But I got to admit, I kind of like doing this better coming off a win than a loss. So if we could have one humble request.
Everything feels better after a win, to quote a man in a high position with intellectual brutality. Everything's better after a win. And hopefully, hey, give me more of them wins. I like that.
Absolutely. And a recommendation, if I will, to those listening to this podcast, if you need a companion for the broadcast this week and you like listening to at least half of this show, you can go ahead and tell me, you were describing it last week. How do folks sync up? Because that was something that I don't know if everybody's aware of. They can get your call on the game in time with what's happening on the field.
Yeah, it's the geniuses at Learfield who I officially work for. I'm like the Walmart at the McDonald's. I work for a different company, but work at the institute, so to speak. But syncmygame.com, you can pause it up and sync it up and just relive the fun. And we have the In the Booth feed on Facebook and YouTube, and obviously the Rice House Game Day app, Varsity Network, all that stuff. But yeah, that's the way I do. Like even World Series last night, syncing up between the announcers. I love Joe Buck as an announcer, but still getting that perspective from the other radio crews. I always like doing that. I'm an audio nerd, so if folks want to do that, that option is out there for them.
And Nate's back, right?
I'm gonna give him a big hug. I loved you, David. But loved having. Hey, Nate was off getting toothpicks from Dusty Baker, but he'll be back in the booth on Saturday.
Rough gig.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, stay tuned for that, everybody. As always, we got another quarterback news to get to. We got practice updates, we got injuries, we got players coming back. If you want to get the inside scoop of what's going on with practice reports and stuff going in the game, we got a Q&A actually going on at the Roost this week. If you have big picture questions about the season and everything else that's going on and what's next, go ahead and drop that one. You can subscribe there, patreon.com/@theroost. That's how we pay the bills, get to do fun stuff like this, and keep things going, more Rice coverage. So we won't stop. We will be here week in, week out, win or lose. But, like a win, always nice. But until next week, take care and Rice fight.
Never dies.